course, I have to ask you, have you already started the conversations with Mr. Nolan for a certain sci-fi movie he might be doing?
It's a longer answer, but put it that way. I wrote something, and he's been writing to that. So, yes, we have started.
So let's go back to the beginning of this film.
All right,
and it begins with the letter.
So about 2 years ago, I ran into him. He goes, if I were to write you one page, would you give me 1 day and just write whatever comes to you? And I'm going, sure, sounds interesting. So he gives me this letter, and let me be very specific about it. It's quite thick paper, and it's typewritten, not computer. It's, proper typewriter, old-fashioned way in the thick.
He writes on a typewriter?
Yeah, certainly this piece was written on a typewriter.
By him, not dictated?
By him, not dictated. And the thick paper meant I knew there was no carbon copy. This is the only one, right?
Oh, wow.
And really, it was a fable. But it was a fable which gave nothing away.
The letter says, Dear Hans.
Dear Hans, here is the fable. And I'm not even going to go and tell you the whole fable, but really the crux of the matter is I have a son, he's 16 years old. Chris knows him very well. I know he's going to become a scientist. And the fable was very much based on a conversation that Chris, his wife Emma, and I had in London a few years earlier at Christmas time. But so this story, this fable, these bits of dialogue he wrote for me were full of personal information that he has about myself and my children. And I wrote the thing about 9 o'clock in the evening and finished it. So this is this tiny piece, just a little bit of piano and a little bit of organ. And it really, I really just wrote about what it meant to be a father. And friend Chris, I said, "Written, do you want me to send it over?" And he says, "No, can I come down, have a quick listen? A little excited here." And he came down, sat on my couch, and I played it for him. It was about 4 minutes long. I get to the end of it, and I'm going, well, what do you think? He goes, "Well, I better make the movie now." I'm going, "What is the movie?" And he starts describing this huge journey, this vast canvas of space and philosophy and science and all these things. And I'm going, hang on. I've written you this tiny little thing here. And he goes, "Yes, but I now know what the heart of the story is." It started out of nowhere with a phone call about 2 years ago, Chris phoning and going, "Look, if I wrote a page, would I, Hans, give him a day and write whatever occurred to me during that page, whatever came to me?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds like an adventure." I was working on a completely different movie, and Chris said to me, if he were to write 1 page of something, and he wouldn't tell me what the movie was about, but he'd just write 1 page, would I give him 1 day, and just whatever came to my mind, I would start writing. I ran into Chris somewhere, and he said, if he wrote me 1 page of something without telling me what the movie was about, would I give him 1 day and just write him a piece of music? I don't know if you know the story of how he started Interstellar. I'd run into Chris about 2 years ago. He said, if I gave you 1 page but wouldn't tell you what the movie is about, would you give me 1 day and just write whatever comes to you? God, sounds like a fun experiment. I ran into Chris somewhere, and he said to me, if he were to write 1 page of something and not tell me what the grand subject was, would I give him 1 day and write whatever came to me from this 1 page? Mm-hmm. Sounds like a good adventure. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm not even sure about the time now, I saw Chris somewhere, and he said to me, what if I wrote you a single page but don't tell you what the movie is about? Just write you 1 page. Will you give me 1 day, and whatever comes to you during this 1 day, will you write it? Of course, sounds great, like great adventure. So Interstellar is a fun story, actually. About 2 years ago, I ran into Chris Nolan, and he said to me, if he were to write 1 page, would I give him 1 day and just write whatever comes to me from that 1 page? And I said, yeah, that sounds like an adventure.
Apparently, Christopher Nolan gave you a letter to start on this film, right?
The famous letter. Chris and I, we see each other as friends. And, one day he said to me, if I write you one page, will you give me one day? And just whatever comes to you, write that. A couple of years ago, Chris Nolan came to me and said, look, I'm not going to tell you what the movie is about, but if I were to write one page, would I give him one day and write a piece of music to whatever he had written on this page? And this envelope arrived. There's this beautiful typewritten fable in it, all about what it's like to be a parent, what it's like to be family. And I just sat down and whatever came to me from the heart. I sat down and I wrote this piece really about what it feels like to be a father and what it feels like to have a son, and I was writing about my son. And this letter arrived, and it was very much about this young man, actually, and my relationship with him. This young man, Jake Zimmer, wants to be a scientist. Well, he is a scientist. So he gave me this one page, typewritten, old typewriter, thick paper, so I knew there were no carbon copies. And it was just this fable, really, about being a parent. And there were a lot of things in it, really. He knows me pretty well. There were lots of things which we had sort of talked about over dinners. I opened the letter on a Sunday, and it was this beautiful typewritten piece of paper, quite thick paper, so I knew there was no carbon copy. It was strictly for me. And it was this fable, and I'm always going to paraphrase it because it was a personal letter to me, a fable about a parent and their child, thinly disguised as well. Him knowing my son Jake, about a father and his scientist son. I picked a Sunday and opened the envelope, and inside was this beautifully typewritten, not computer, proper old typewriter, rather thick paper. So I knew there was no carbon copy, so it was just literally a letter from him to me. And it was very much about the relationship of a parent with their child. It was very much about the relationship of a parent to a scientific child. My son Jake, who wants to be a scientist, and Chris knows this, so there was enough biographical material in it to truly draw me in. So I spent that day really writing about my relationship to my son. So an envelope turned up with this beautiful typewritten letter, quite thick paper, so I knew there wasn't a carbon copy, and not, typewritten, not computer, none of that stuff. And it was this very personal fable, really, about a father-son relationship. And now I have a son who wants to be a scientist. Chris knows him very well. So I sat down and I just wrote this tiniest, most intimate, really from the heart. I was writing about my relationship with my son. Presented me with a beautifully typewritten page, which really told nothing about the movie other than that it was the story of a father and his child. And he was pressing all the buttons that he knew about me. I mean, I am a father. It was very much about my relationship to my children. Sure enough, this envelope turned up, and inside was, and I think I want to be very specific about this, typewritten. We're not talking about computers here. We're talking old-fashioned typewriter. This beautiful fable written on quite thick paper. So I knew there was no carbon copy. I knew this was the only one. And really, it was about a father and his son. And really, the more I read it, the more I realized it was about a conversation that Chris and his wife Emma and I had had. Just when we were just talking about our kids, etc. I phoned him in the evening and said, "Do you want me to send it up to the house?" And he goes, "No, can I come down?" I played it to him, this tiny, tiny, personal, tiny piece. So I wrote the piece, phoned him up Sunday, 9:30 at night. And I said to him, "Do you want me to send it over?" And he goes, "No, can you come down?" Came down and I played it to him. So I wrote this very intimate, very personal musical love letter to my children. I phoned Chris about 9:30 at night and I said, "Look, I've done it. What do you want to do? Do you want me to send it to you?" And he said, "No, can I come over?" And he came over. So I did exactly as requested. I just sat there and I wrote this love letter, basically, about my son. Phoned Chris at about 9 o'clock in the evening and said, I've written, do you want me to send it over? And it was more like, look, do you mind if I come by? He got into his car, he came over to my studio, sat down on the couch. And this was very small and very personal, this tune. 9:30 at night, I phoned Chris and he said, can you come down and have a listen to it? I played it to him, and again, this is... Had a listen, and I said, what do you think? And he goes, well, I better make the movie. And I said to him, what is the movie? Because that was the thing that he, of course, he hadn't told me. And so he's describing this sort of huge canvas journey, this huge, theatre, and it was this tiny, tiny piece, and he told what the heart of the movie is. So Soph looked at him and went, so what do you think? And he goes, suppose I better make the movie. And then I said, what is the movie? And that was a good way to start, because it was, it was very small. I mean, then he told me, oh, it's this huge epic space and all these sort of things. And actually, somewhere while he was explaining the physics and everything to me, I said, hang on a second, but I've only written you this tiny little fragile theme. And he goes, yeah, I know where the heart of the story is now. And I played him, it was about 4 minutes long. So I'm playing it, and I turn around and I look at him. I'm going, so what do you think? And he's going, I better make the movie now. And I'm going, well, what is the movie? Because there was no content, text or anything in this. And he starts discussing this huge space adventure. And I'm going, hey, wait a second. I've written you this tiny, intimate piece. And he goes, yeah, but I know what the heart of the story is now. And he goes, suppose I better make the movie now. And I'm going, what is the movie? Because he hadn't told me anything. And he just starts describing worlds, and he describes this huge science fiction world. And I'm going, but hang on, I've given you this most personal of tunes. And he goes, I now know what the heart of the story is. I finished playing it to him, turned around to him. I said, so what do you think? And he's going, suppose I better make the movie now. I'm going, well, what is the movie? Because he had given me no context, nothing. There was just this. Mm-hmm. And he started describing this enormous canvas space, everything. I mean, and at one point I'm going, Chris, I just written you the most humblest of tunes, the most personal little thing. And he's going, yes, but I now know where the heart of the story is. Played Chris this piece and, went, so what do you think? And he just sort of paused a moment. He went, well, I suppose I better make the movie now. And I said, well, what is the movie? And he started describing, this vast canvas of space and science. And finally I said, but hang on a second, Chris. I've written you this tiny, fragile, incredibly personal love letter of a piece of music between a father and a son. How does this fit? And he goes, well, I now know what the center, what the heart of the story is. And we get to the end, and I sort of, sheepishly go, what do you think? Is it all right? Mm-hmm. And he pauses and goes, suppose I better make the movie now. And I'm going, well, what is the movie? Because, of course, he hadn't given me any context. And he starts describing this vast canvas of space and celebrating science. And we talk. And at one point I went, hang on a second. I've written you the most fragile personal piece. How's this going to work? With, the vastness of space. And he just said, look, I now know what the heart of the story is. Mm-hmm. I've told this story quite a few times now, but I'll tell it again. If he were to write one page of something, would I give him one day?
If I wrote a page, would I, Hans, give him a day?
If I were to write you one page, would you give me one day? And just write you one page, will you give me one day? If I gave you one page. If you were to write one page of something. If he wrote me one page of something without telling me what the movie was about. If he were to write one page of something. One page.